Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Vulkan, and today we're answering one of the biggest questions I get, and that's how to increase your damage. Well, in Tower of Fantasy, being able to clear enemies quickly is sort of the name of the game, especially for certain modes. So having a high damage output is important, unless you're a tank or a healer, but even then, heals typically scale off of attack, so having more of that is always better. So how do we go about doing that? Well, there are lots of ways to boost your attack. You have the most obvious one, and that's upgrading weapons. So this is going to give some large increases to your weapon stats. It's the most straightforward. And here you want to upgrade until you reach the point where you need to augment, and then spend those rare resources to break through and gain access to another 10 levels. But that's not the only area where you can improve weapons. You can also advance them, and this is where your damage can get some really large boosts depending on the weapon you're using. So for healers and tanks, it's often more focused towards that role, but for damage dealers, you can gain some powerful triggers to increase the effectiveness. So let's take an SR and an SSR, for example. So for our SR, let's take a look at Echo, our first character. So for her, once you advance her spear and gain 1 star, her shatter increases by 15%, and after shattering a shield, you can grant your teammates a 15% attack buff. So while this doesn't benefit you, it does benefit your overall team. Now in the case of another SR, Hilda, her 1 star will grant a stacking damage increase buff the more successful attacks you can chain together. So even early on, you can see there are some really good ways to improve your damage. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's check out an SSR, King. So at 1 star, King increases his shatter by 15%, and after shattering the shield, he applies a dot that'll tick for 120% of your total attack every second for 15 seconds, which is pretty great, and it helps increase your persistent damage on targets. Now those are just the 1 star advancements, but as you continue investing in characters, they're going to continue unlocking better and better passives. Now the last thing you can do with weapons is insert weapon matrices, which are like these little data chips. You can add stats, they unlock set bonuses, and the cool thing is they can also be upgraded. You can equip 4 of them per weapon, and they each have different stats they bring to the table. So some will give boosts to health and resistance, while others will give you attack and crit. Now upgrading these and unlocking set bonuses are huge sources of damage for your character. So early on, you're going to have like a middle of the road blue, but as you go and kill world bosses, upgrade your suppressor, and clear content, you're going to eventually earn some SSR ones, which is great. Now, if you want to, you can also spend some currency on the weapon matrix banner to try to unlock some of those SSR chips there as well. So to give an example of how powerful these can be, let's look at King again. So his SSR chip has a 2-piece and a 4-piece bonus. Now the 2-piece bonus, that'll give you 14% damage for 25 seconds whenever you shatter a shield, which is great. That increases your damage even further. The 4-piece is going to restore your health per hit whenever there are more than 2 enemies near you, which is always. I mean, you're a melee character. There should always be characters outside of just a single boss fight that are going to be around you. So this just piles onto how powerful these things can truly be. Now, if we take a look at another one, by Ling, this is an SR chip that'll increase your damage dealt to Grievous targets by up to 18%. Now, this does have a prerequisite, but it is one that you can take advantage of and build around, especially if you have a physical damage team. So it might be up more often than you think. So if you see something that has a prerequisite, don't sleep on it. Now, all of the characters in the game do have their own set of matrices that you can find and equip. Sometimes they're the best in slot, other times you might need to mix and match to find one that fits your build. But either way, they're a huge source of damage. So that wraps up everything we can do with our weapons to boost our damage, but not necessarily everything that we can do. So there are a few other systems we can use to boost our damage output, and we're going to start with our suppressor. So your suppressor is a huge source of primary stats for your character. As you level up and increase your character score, you're also going to upgrade your suppressor and use potent omnium crystals to do that. So this is going to give you large increases to your attack, health, crit, and resistance. So you can see here that my attack is taking huge jumps every single time we unlock a new shard. And because of that, I'm able to increase my overall attack and outgoing damage. Now, there really isn't much else you can do with your suppressor other than upgrade it, right? You just go through, click on the thing, it upgrades. But you might notice that every time we unlock the last shard, we gain a new weapon matrix to use. Now, the first 4 are going to be Echo chips, so you can use those for the time being, but then eventually you'll get to SSR Shiro chips that can be used for Shiro or honestly for whoever. Now, the last place you can upgrade to increase your damage output is through your gear. So you have 10 slots with various pieces of armor that you can equip, but also enhance. Now, gear does come with base stats, which are always the same, but they also roll with random stats, which is where the grind comes into play. You want to get random stats that improve your build. So because we want to increase our damage, we want extra attack and crit if possible. Now, alternatively, you can also get frost attack or fire attack, which is great if you have weapons that use those elements. Now, the other thing to understand about gear is that slots typically have a theme. So like chest items are going to give you health and resistance as base stats, while arms will give attack and crit, for example. Then you have enhancing and advancement. So enhancing is going to increase that slot's base stats, and then after reaching a breakthrough, you gain an additional stat added to that slot. So for instance, if I have a pair of gloves and I enhance those gloves, if I get a new pair of gloves and swap them out, I still keep that same base stat as well as the additional stat that got added to that slot. The only thing different will be my randomized stats. Now, advancement is when you invest materials or trash gear from the same slot to increase the random stats on a piece of gear. So for instance, you can invest crystals and old gloves to increase the stats on your currently equipped gloves. Now this serves two purposes. One, it gets rid of old gear you no longer need, and it helps boost your stats. But please be aware, whenever you advance something, that all of that advancement, all that investment is stuck to that single piece of gear. So again, if I get a new pair of gloves and I swap them out, all of that investment just left onto that other pair. So I have to start all over on this new one. Now, when it comes to the priority of upgrading gear, really it comes down to what you want to do. So if you're a tank, then you want to upgrade your health and resistance gear first so you can take more hits. If you're a healer or damage, you can focus on your attack gear to increase your damage and your healing output. But honestly, at the end of the day, attack is beneficial to all playstyles, so truly you can prioritize that. Now, the last permanent upgrade you can do is to invest into a character to unlock their passives. So let's look at Suppressor, for instance. As you invest gifts, she's going to unlock awakening traits called Rainstorm and Raging Waves. Now, both of these will increase her attack each time she deals damage, ultimately resulting in a 25.5% attack increase, which is added on top of the 15% damage increase that she gets from her dodge arrows. So if you activate everything, she gives 2 powerful damage increases, which is just insane. This is why Suppressor is on another level as a buffing machine and why she is an incredibly strong support character. So those are the ways that you can permanently increase your damage, but there are a few more ways to get more out of your character. You have food and you have combat. So starting with food, apart from the obvious things like healing and satiety, you can also get damage buffs. You can increase your damage by eating foods that match the attack type of your weapon. So for instance, check this out. We have this truffled fried rice. This increases our physical attack by 2% into 150, or we have this purple yam pie that increases our volt damage. And the thing is, these aren't just available in-game. You can eat these whenever you want. You can get these super early, starting with blue foods like seafood soup. So make sure to craft a handful of foods that work for your team and eat them before you take on challenging content, because believe me, it will help you out way more than you think. Now you can also visit Mia's kitchen a few times per day to get a food buff. So make sure to grab that first before consuming your cooked food. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the actual combat itself, because there are some big differences between just spamming left click and actually understanding how the weapon works and the combos that it has. So for instance, let's talk about King again. So he has standard attack to deal damage, but then he also has aerial attacks, which deal large AoE damage. Then he has an attack that triggers when you jump an attack, but then he also has a gravity attack that'll pull enemies in towards him when you attack 4 times, and then heavy attack. And this is just one example of how unique a weapon can be in terms of the combos you can perform with it. You have daggers, you have katana, you have bows. Now all of them are different and have different attacks you can use to take full advantage of what that weapon offers. So don't just spam left click and use your skills. Instead, practice a little to understand the weapon, and once you do, you'll be able to control the battlefield and inflict way more destruction than you would have been able to originally. Now, the last thing I want to touch on briefly are elemental weaknesses. I know this is a very simple thing, and they cover it a lot in the tutorial, but it's still something just to keep an eye out for. You need to take advantage of elemental weaknesses when you can. For instance, hyenas typically take more damage from Volt, while machines take more damage from Frost. So keeping a well-rounded set of weapons and relics will help exploit these when you can. So everyone, that wraps this one up. I hope this helps you increase your damage and crush content. So what tips do you all have? Drop them in the comment section below. And if you like Tower of Fantasy, consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel more than you guys could imagine. As always, thank you so much for all the support. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.